Adunni's hands were already in the clay when BC struck the first match. She did not see it happen. She was at the river, knees deep in red earth, pulling out the thick wet clay that would become her future, pot by pot, coin by coin. The sky was still dark, the village was still sleeping, and somewhere behind her, in the small compound they called home, her sister was burning everything. The smell reached her first. She thought it was a neighbor's fire, somebody cooking early maybe. She kept walking. She shaped the base of a pot with both hands, pressing inward with her thumbs the way her grandmother had taught her before everything fell apart. She hummed quietly to herself. She always hummed when she was trying not to think about how scared she was. Then the smell changed. It was not food, it was paper. Adunni stood up slowly. She looked toward the compound. A thin ribbon of orange light was climbing the wall. Her body understood before her mind did. She dropped the clay and ran. By the time she got there, the fire had already eaten her notes. All 3 notebooks. The textbook she had borrowed and wrapped in cloth to protect. The loose pages she had copied from the school library by hand because she could not afford to buy the books. The letter from the university she had read so many times she could recite it in her sleep. That too was gone, curling into black at the edges. Then nothing. Bisi stood with her arms folded. Ramota stood beside her, watching. Adunni looked at the ashes. She did not scream. She did not beg. She just stood there while something inside her cracked open, quietly, completely, the way a clay pot cracks when the heat gets too high too fast. "You think I will stop," she said. Her voice was low. "You think this is enough to stop me?" Bisi laughed. "Stop what? Wasting your time? Yes, we stopped it. You should be thanking us." "Thanking you?" Adunni repeated the word slowly, like she was tasting poison. Ramota said, "You were going to embarrass this family, running to university like a man, leaving your home, leaving your future. I did not raise you to be a fool, Adunni." "You raised me to be invisible," Adunni said, "and I refused." Ramota's hand came fast. The slap landed hard on Adunni's left cheek. The sound cut through the early morning air like a knife. Adunni's head turned with it. She did not raise her hand back. She did not cry. She pressed her palm against her cheek, turned around, and walked back toward the river. If you are watching this and you know someone who refused to give up even when everything was taken from them, drop their name in the comments right now. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on the bell because this story is only getting started. Adunni had not always been this strong. There was a time, not so long ago, when she cried easily. When her father was alive, she cried at small things. A broken sandal, a spoilt pot, a bad market day. Her father would hold her face between his rough palms and say, "Adunni, tears are not weakness, but they must not be your answer." He died when she was 12. After that, she taught herself to cry only at night, only quietly, only when no one was watching. That was the year Ramota changed. Her mother had not always been the woman she was now. Once she had been warm. Once she had plaited Adunni's hair on Sunday mornings and sung old Yoruba songs about rivers and patience. But grief had done something to her. It had dried her out, the way sun dries clay, and what was left was hard and brittle and certain. Certain that life would not give her daughters anything. Certain that the only safe place for a girl was inside a marriage. Certain that hope was a dangerous thing to carry. Bisi had accepted this. Bisi had folded herself into her mother's certainty like a letter into an envelope. She stopped asking for things. She stopped dreaming aloud. She watched Adunni with eyes that were half envy, half contempt, because Adunni kept asking. Adunni kept reaching, and that Bisi could not forgive. The admission letter came 4 months ago. Adunni had collected it herself from the post office in town, hiding it inside her wrapper on the walk home. She sat alone behind the compound, read it 3 times, then folded it and pressed it under the floorboard beneath her sleeping mat. She told no one. She just kept walking, kept saving, kept waking before dawn to dig clay from the riverbed and shape pots and carry them to the market on her head. She had a plan. She always had a plan. What she had not planned for was Bisi watching her count money one night. She had not planned for the quiet, deliberate way her sister decided to destroy her. The morning after the fire, Adunni went back to the river and started over. She had nothing to study from, but she had her mind. She had everything she had already read, still sitting inside her head like furniture that could not be burned. She tore a page from a thin notebook she found behind the market stall of an old woman who sold pepper and used it to begin rewriting everything she remembered. Her handwriting was cramped and fast, like she was afraid the memories would run if she did not catch them quickly. Mama Tokumbo saw her and came to sit beside her. Mama Tokumbo said, "Your eyes are swollen." Adunni said, "I am fine." "You are not fine. What happened?" Adunni kept walking. Then she stopped. She looked at Mama Tokumbo, at her lines on her face, at the kanga tied firmly around her wide waist, at the eyes that had seen everything and still chose kindness, and something in her broke open again, but differently this time, not like a crack, like a door. She told her everything. Mama Tokumbo did not speak for a long time when she finished. Then she put one hand on Adunni's knee and said, "Those women made a mistake. Fire cannot burn what is already inside you. You hear me? It cannot." Then she stood up, walked to 3 other market women, spoke to them quietly, and came back with 2 notebooks, a pencil, and a second-hand textbook that was missing its cover but still had every page. Adunni held the books to her chest like they were living things. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. Mama Tokumbo looked at her steadily. "Because someone should have done it for me." The weeks that followed were the hardest Adunni had ever lived through. And she had lived through hard things. She had buried her father at 12. She had watched hunger walk through her home like it owned the place. She had carried pots on her head in rain so heavy it blurred her vision, and still made it to the market without breaking a single one. But this, studying from memory, rebuilding from nothing, sleeping in the same compound with the 2 people who had tried to destroy her, this was a different kind of hard. This was the kind that lived inside your chest and pressed down every time you tried to breathe. She woke before everyone. She was at the river by 4 in the morning, digging clay in the dark, humming softly to keep herself company. By 7, she was at the market, pots arranged neatly on a cloth, her rewritten notes tucked beside her, studying between customers. By noon, she was home, eating whatever was left in the pot, sometimes nothing, and resting for exactly 1 hour before going back to the river for a second load. By night, she was at the small kerosene lamp in the corner of the room, reading until the oil ran out or her eyes gave up, whichever came first. Ramota watched her and said nothing. That silence was its own kind of war. Bisi began doing something worse than shouting. She began acting like Adunni did not exist. She would look directly through her at the dinner table, respond to her questions with nothing, move around her in the compound like she was air. It was the kind of dismissal that was designed to make a person feel like they had already lost, like they were already gone. Adunni refused to disappear. One evening, she came back from the market to find her sleeping mat moved outside the door. Her few clothes had been folded and placed on top of it.
Bisi was inside, the door shut. Adunni picked up her mat, unfolded it right there in the corridor, and lay down. She stared at the ceiling. She said out loud, to no one, to herself, to God, to whatever was listening, "I will not leave. You will not push me out of my own life." Then she closed her eyes and slept. It was Mama Tokunbo who first noticed that Adunni's pots had changed. She had started adding patterns to them. Thin geometric lines pressed carefully into the wet clay before firing. Designs she had seen in her art history textbook. Patterns rooted in old Yoruba craft traditions she had read about in the school library. The pots were no longer just functional. They were beautiful. They caught the eye from 3 stores away. Women stopped to touch them, turn them over in their hands, ask questions. A cloth trader named Alhaji Suleiman passed through the market on his way to Ibadan. He stopped at Adunni's store, picked up a pot, turned it twice and said, "How many of these can you make in a month?" Adunni looked at him evenly. "How many do you need?" 50. For a hotel in Lagos. They want local craft pieces for their rooms. Authentic. None of that plastic nonsense. Adunni's heart was hammering. She kept her face completely calm. 50 is manageable, but my price is firm. Everything is negotiable, Alhaji Suleiman said, smiling. Not my work, Adunni said. It took me years to learn this. You are not paying for clay, you are paying for what I know. He looked at her for a moment, surprised, reassessing. Then he laughed. Fine, your price. I want them in 6 weeks. They shook hands right there between the pepper seller and the fabric store. When he walked away, Mama Tokunbo appeared at Adunni's elbow and grabbed her arm. Did that just happen? She whispered. Do not make me celebrate yet, Adunni whispered back, but her hands were shaking. That night, alone by the kerosene lamp, she did the calculation 3 times. The money from Alhaji's order, if she was careful, if she worked every day, would cover her first semester tuition with enough left over to eat properly for 2 months. She pressed her hand flat against the paper where she had written the number and sat very still. She was going to university. Nobody was going to stop her. The morning she walked onto the university campus for the first time, she wore her best dress. Yellow cotton, slightly faded at the hem, ironed the night before with a flat iron heated on the kerosene stove. She carried borrowed books in a plastic bag. She had eaten half a piece of bread for breakfast because she did not want to spend the morning feeling heavy. She stood at the gate for a long moment. Around her, other students moved in groups, laughing, carrying new bags, talking loudly on phones. Some of them had parents dropping them off in cars. Some had brand new shoes. Adunni had walked 40 minutes from the bus stop. She did not feel small. She felt something closer to fury, the clean, quiet kind that does not shout but simply moves forward. She tightened her grip on the plastic bag, lifted her chin, and walked through the gate. Her first lecture was Introduction to Business Management. The hall was large and cold from an air conditioner she had never sat under before. She found a seat near the middle, took out her notebook, the one Mama Tokunbo had given her, and wrote the date at the top of the first page. The lecturer walked in, a tall woman in a grey blazer who spoke fast and expected you to keep up. Adunni kept up. She wrote everything. When a boy beside her leaned over and whispered, "You actually take notes by hand?" She did not answer him. She just kept writing. After class, the same boy jogged to catch up with her outside. "I am Rotimi. I was not mocking you. I was genuinely impressed. I type and I still miss half of what she says." Adunni slowed slightly. "Adunni," she said, "You look like someone who already knows exactly what she wants," Rotimi said. "I do," she said simply, and kept walking. But she was smiling, just barely, just enough. If this story is speaking to you, if you know what it feels like to build something from nothing while the people closest to you tear it down, tell me in the comments, and make sure you like this video because the next part of Adunni's story is going to break your heart before it puts it back together. Back at the compound, Ramota had begun to notice things. The way Adunni left early and returned late, the way she no longer looked uncertain when she walked, the way she ate, carefully, deliberately, like a woman managing resources, not a girl scraping by. Something had shifted and Ramota could feel it even if she could not name it. One night, she called Adunni into the room, just the two of them. Bisi was out. "Where do you go every day?" Ramota asked. "I go to the market and school," Adunni said. Ramota's jaw tightened. "I told you, Mama," Adunni said. "I love you. I will always love you. But I am going. I have already paid. I am already going. You can be angry with me. You can refuse to speak to me. But I will not stop." Ramota stared at her daughter. Something moved behind her eyes. Something old and complicated and not entirely without tenderness. But she said nothing. She turned her face to the wall. Adunni stood there another moment, then quietly left the room. She went outside, sat on the step beneath the open sky, looked up at the stars, and let herself feel everything. The loneliness, the grief, the bone-deep exhaustion, and then she breathed it out slowly. She was still here. She was still standing. Somewhere across the compound, a door opened. Footsteps, then Rotimi's voice. No, not Rotimi. She was home, she reminded herself. It was just the neighbor's radio drifting over the fence. An old song her father used to hum. She closed her eyes and let it play. And for just a moment, sitting under that Yoruba sky with clay still under her nails and a university ID card tucked into her bra for safekeeping, Adunni allowed herself to believe, fully, dangerously, completely, that she was going to make it. The cooperative started the way most important things start, quietly, without announcement, almost by accident. It was a Tuesday morning when Mama Tokunbo brought her daughter to Adunni's store and said, "Teach her what you know. She has hands but no direction." Adunni looked at the girl, 16, eyes wide, fingers already reaching towards the clay samples on display, and said nothing for a moment. Then she pulled out a small lump of clay from under the store and placed it in her hands. "Press here. Feel how it resists you. That resistance is telling you something. Listen to it." Within 3 weeks, 4 more women had asked to learn. Within 6 weeks, Adunni had a small group of 7 meeting at the riverbank 3 mornings before the market opened. She taught them the geometric patterns. She taught them how to fire the clay properly so it will not crack under pressure. She taught them how to price their work, not based on what they thought people would pay, but based on what the work was actually worth. The last lesson took the longest. These were women who had spent their whole lives underselling themselves. Adunni understood that more than anyone. What she had not expected was what university was doing to her in return. Every business class she attended, every contract law lecture she scribbled into her notebook, she would come home and find a way to apply it. The cooperative became her classroom and her laboratory at the same time. She drew up a simple agreement for all the women to sign. She created a shared savings pool from 10% of each member's monthly earnings. She negotiated a collective supply deal with a clay merchant in town that cut their material cost by 1/3. Mama Tokunbo watched all of this with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had always known. "You are not just a potter anymore," she told Adunni one afternoon. "I was never just a potter," Adunni said. Mama Tokunbo laughed, a full round sound that scattered the nearby pigeons. "No, you were not." Rotimi found her again at the library 3 months into the semester. She was deep in a textbook, highlighter in hand, her own highlighter now, bought with money she had earned herself, when he dropped into the seat across from her without asking permission. "You never told me which department," he said. "You never asked," she said without looking up. "Business administration," Rotimi guessed. She looked up then. "How did you know?" he smiled. "Because you walk like someone who already knows exactly what she wants." She studied him for a moment. He had an open face, the kind that made it difficult to be suspicious of him. She had spent so long being careful with people, reading exits before she read rooms, that an uncomplicated face felt almost disorienting. "Rotimi," she said, "what do you want?" "To know you," he said simply. "I've been watching you for 3 months. You sit alone, you eat alone, you leave before anyone can talk to you, but you are the most alive person in every room you walk into." Something shifted in Adunni's chest. She looked back at her book.
They sat under a neem tree behind the faculty building and shared a plate of rice and stew from the campus canteen. He talked easily about his family in Osun State, about how he had wanted to study engineering but ended up in economics because his father said it was more practical, about how he still did not know if his father was right. He laughed at himself often. He asked questions and then actually waited for the answers. Adunni found herself talking, really talking, not performing composure, not managing what she revealed. She told him about the clay, about the fire, about the night she slept in the corridor on her mat and looked at the ceiling and told herself she would not disappear. When she finished, Rotimi was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across and covered her hand with his. He did not say anything profound. He did not try to fix anything. He just held her hand and let the silence say what words could not. She looked at their hands. She looked at his face. "Do not make me regret this," she said quietly. "I will spend every day making sure you do not," he said. When he walked her to the bus stop that evening, he stopped just before they reached the road. He turned to face her. The sun was low, the light golden and warm on everything. He looked at her the way nobody had looked at her in a very long time, like she was something worth seeing. He kissed her gently. Just once, his hand light on her jaw, her breath catching before she could stop it, the evening noise of the campus fading briefly into nothing. When he pulled back, she pressed her fingers to her lips without thinking. Then she laughed, suddenly, unexpectedly, and it surprised them both. "What?" he said, grinning. "Nothing," she said. "Everything. I do not know." He walked her to the bus, stood watching until it pulled away, and Adunni sat in the last seat with her plastic bag of books on her lap and her heart doing something new and unfamiliar in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to joy. Bisi came to the market on a Wednesday morning in the middle of dry season. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in the way a person looks when pride has been slowly leaking out of them for months. Her wrapper was clean, but her eyes were tired. She stood at the edge of Adunni's stall and did not speak for a long moment. Adunni kept arranging her pots. She did not rush the silence. "I need help," Bisi finally said. "I know," Adunni said. "I borrowed money from Mama Caro. I cannot repay it. She is threatening to come to the compound." "How much?" Bisi told her. Adunni did the number in her head immediately. It was manageable. Not comfortable, but manageable. "I will help you, but I need you to understand something first." Bisi lifted her eyes. "I forgive you," Adunni said. "Not because what you did was small. It was not small. You burned my future with your own hands and you stood there and watched. I forgive you because carrying that is too heavy and I have other things to carry. But we are not the same as before. Do you understand me? You do not get to be my enemy and my family at the same time. Choose." Bisi's mouth trembled. For a moment, she looked like the younger girl she had once been, before the jealousy calcified into cruelty, before she decided that tearing someone else down was easier than building herself up. "I am sorry," she said. It came out rough and unpolished, the way real apologies do. I was wrong. I could not stand watching you want things. It made me ashamed of myself, and instead of fixing myself, I tried to break you. I am sorry, Adunni." Adunni looked at her sister for a long time. Then she stepped around the stall and took Bisi's hand and squeezed it once. "Come back tomorrow. I will have the money, and after that, if you want, I will teach you how to make pots." Bisi blinked. "Me?" Adunni said simply, "Your hands are the same shape as mine. You always had the same hands." The invitation to speak came 3 weeks later. A women's cooperative in the next town had heard about Adunni through Mama Tokumbo, through the market network that moved news faster than any newspaper, and they wanted her to come and talk about how she had built what she built. She stood before 30 women in a community hall with a ceiling fan that worked intermittently and chairs arranged in a wide half circle. She had no notes. She did not need them. She told them about clay, about how it begins as something formless, pulled from the earth with bare hands, and how it takes the shape of whatever you are strong enough to make it into. She told them that the fire that is meant to destroy you is sometimes the same fire that makes you permanent. "They burned my books," she said, her voice even and clear. "My mother watched, my sister lit the match, and I went back to the river the next morning and I started again. Not because I was not afraid, I was terrified. But fear does not get to make your decisions. You do." The room was very quiet. She continued, "Whatever burned in your life, whatever they took, whatever you lost, you are still here, which means the most important thing survived. You survived. Now build." When she finished, the applause started slowly and then rose until it filled the hall and spilled out the open windows into the afternoon air. Mama Tokumbo was in the back row. When Adunni's eyes found her, the older woman pressed both hands to her chest and nodded once, the way people nod when words are not enough. The last image of Adunni's story is this: before sunrise at the river, hands in red clay. But she is not alone now. Bisi is beside her, clumsy and slow but trying. 2 girls from the cooperative are across from her, laughing quietly at something. Rotimi's voice comes from her phone propped against a stone. He is reading her notes from a lecture she missed because of a large order that came in from Abuja. Everything that was taken from her is back. Not the same, not restored to what it was, but rebuilt into something stronger, something fired. She looks up from the clay for a moment and watches the sky begin to lighten at the edges. Pink first, then orange, then gold, spreading slow and setting across everything. She presses her thumbs into the center of the clay and begins to shape. If this story moved you, if Adunni's fire reminded you of your own, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know who is in this community. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in the next story. Keep building, keep going. The fire does not get the final word. You do.